All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. I thank you for joining us so quickly. I'm Kiara Pasante Houghton. I'm the Vice President of Campaigns and Communications at the National Women's Law Center. And we've assembled this brilliant group of civil rights leaders and experts for this press conference after Donald Trump's outrageous claims following the tragic plane crash that killed 67 people last night near National Airport over the Potomac River. So first on this call, you'll hear from Fatima Goss Graves from the National Women's Law Center. Then we'll hear from Margaret Huang from the Seven Poverty Law Center. Following Margaret, we'll have Damon Hewiit, who leads the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights under law. And before we take your questions, Kelley Robinson, who is the president of the Human Rights Campaign, will make remarks. So Fatima, over to you.
Thank you so much, Kira. And again, I'm Fatima Goss Graves. I'm the president and CEO of the National Women's Law Center. And like many of you are in this country, I woke up this morning to the really tragic news that we saw so many people in our backyard effectively lose their lives. And the only response from a responsible leader in the face of a tragedy of that sort should be to comfort families, to hold their hands, and to ensure this never happens again in our nation. And so I was both disturbed and unfortunately unsurprised to see within hours, the leaders in this country, including up to this president, once again demonizing diversity, demonizing equity, to try to distract from the responsibility of leading in this time. And so, really, I am here to say first that enough is enough. We cannot be in a situation where our leaders up and down this country are meeting the problems of today with hate, division, and silliness. I also just want to add that we see through the efforts to not only distract from the real problems of today, but to undermine our 60-plus-year-old civil rights infrastructure. For the last 6 years, this country has determined that the ability to participate and work and in schools and in public life should happen without discrimination, that our nation is a stronger nation based on the fact that it is a nation of diverse people, and that the people in this country are made better if they could participate in public life and in private spaces without having to endure discrimination and harassment. Our workplaces are better, our schools are better, our lives are better. We agreed on that 60 years ago. We passed laws to make that clear. They have been reaffirmed again and again. And Donald Trump and his administration just calling things illegal does not make it so. And this group and others will fight to defend the rights of all people in this country against discrimination, against harassment, and against the bullying in all its forms, no matter where it comes from. So I guess my final thought, as an organization that fights for gender justice, that works on behalf of women and girls and all people in this country, our work and task ahead is to not be confused by the hateful rhetoric, not be confused by the flurry of executive actions that are on their face illegal, and not be confused by efforts to do all of this in the name of defending women. We don't buy it, we won't stand for it, and we will continue to fight for the freedoms and future of all people in this country. Thanks, Kira.
Thank you, Fatima. Margaret?
Thanks so much. Appreciate very much the National Women's Law Center convening us today. This tragedy really struck home for me because I landed at National Airport last night at 9:15 p.m. on an American Eagle flight. And as I walked out of the airport, I saw the fire trucks and ambulances arrive. And my heart truly goes out to all the people who've lost their loved ones in this terrible tragedy. And I want to be very clear, this tragedy has nothing to do with DEI. Blaming a tragic air crash on what makes our country great, which is our diversity, equity, and inclusion, it's offensive and it's wrong, especially because we know these values make our nation stronger and equally across public, private, and nonprofit sectors. As the victims are still being identified and the investigation is just beginning, President Trump has already made up his mind about who or what to blame. Diversity. I find the president's outrageous comments disgraceful and unbecoming of the office that he holds. Above all, they're a lie. They make clear that this president values spreading hate and racist rhetoric more than showing the leadership our country so desperately needs after this kind of tragedy. His attacks on diversity, equity, and inclusion aren't about a particular program or some acronym. They're just a sanitized substitute for the racist comments that can no longer be spoken openly. But the message is the same, that women, Black and brown communities are inherently less capable. And if they hold positions of power or authority in government or business, it must be because the standards were lowered. Let's be clear. These attacks are not about merit, no matter how many times he says they are. Shutting doors of opportunity for qualified women, people of color, and people with disabilities is simply rolling back civil rights protections and promoting efforts to make discrimination legal. Such actions are counter to our collective values as Americans and to our Constitution. And we will stand together with all of these organizations and others to fight. Thank you.
Thanks, Margaret. Damon?
Thank you so much, Fatima and colleagues. I join my colleagues in our horror, our sadness at the tragic loss of life. So many people have been impacted. Last night, we were met with the horrible news, and this morning, so many of us learned more. And we learned at my organization, the Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights and the Law, that a close friend of one of our employees was lost in the tragedy. And so this hits home for so many people. The last thing we needed while we were caring for our own and each other was someone to come along and try to divide us and divide this nation. That's exactly what Donald Trump has done. That's exactly what he's about. His attacks on diversity, equity, and inclusion aren't just simple policy disagreements. They're anti-Black, they're anti-brown, they're anti-women, anti-anyone who isn't like him, but they're also anti-American. These efforts are just a cynical attempt to scapegoat certain communities. Let me speak directly to the American people when I say this. Donald Trump is trying to convince you that Black people are your problem. He is trying to convince you that brown people are your problem, that queer people, differently able people, that women are America's problem. This is the same type of tactic he used for decades, the same tactic he used to blame the Central Park Five and label them falsely and accuse them. He is the great divider of our times. Do not be fooled. He is engaging in fear tactics to stoke division. And his attacks aren't just about politics. He is trying to divide and unravel the very fabric of our country and our democracy itself, rolling back decades of progress back to the time before 60 years ago, before we had effective civil rights laws in this nation to usher in a great second reconstruction of this nation. These attacks again, are so dangerous. They're dangerous in part because he knows that diversity, equity, and inclusion is simply a way to comply with existing federal rights laws, civil rights laws. He doesn't like those laws, so he wants to try to rewrite them with the stroke of a pen and with his mouth. It stops now. The bullying of American people, the bullying of corporate America into the mind trick of turning things on our heads so that the laws, the things that they used to comply with the law are now being said to be illegal. It stops now. We are calling you out. America has a conscience, America has a heart, and America has common sense. It stops now. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Damon. And to Kelley.
Hey, everybody, I'm Kelley Robinson, president of the Human Rights Campaign. I too want to express my deep heartbreak for the victims of this horrific incident. 67 lives, 67 lives cut short, families grieving, communities in crisis. Like so many other Americans and the folks on this call with me today, I was so shaken by this incident last night. Damon and Margaret, your comments really stuck with me. I was on a flight that took off from DCA just about 10 minutes before the tragedy unfolded. The reason that this hits home is that it's not just me, it's not just us on this call, but too many of us are too close to a tragedy. Too many of us are too close to our lives being totally devastated by an administration who's using the currency of chaos to govern. This is a moment that demands serious leadership. Let's be clear. These are serious times that demand serious leadership focused on facts, safety, and solutions. But instead, we see an attempt to scapegoat and create more chaos in a way that both disrespects the loved ones of these victims and wastes the time, energy, and the money of the American people. I can't say enough about how deeply troubling the response of this administration has been as we've witnessed this incredible tragedy. Their response reveals so much about the state of leadership in our nation. Donald Trump, the president of the United States, has chosen to use this moment not to comfort the affected families, not to unite the country, but instead to sow chaos and launch baseless accusations on diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives, to scapegoat marginalized communities. And let me be very clear about this. The facts do not support these reckless claims. The aviation industry's workforce demographics tell us a very different story. Nearly 70% of these critical roles are actually held by white Americans. According to the Federal Bureau of Labor Statistics, more than 90% of all aircraft pilots are white males. Not only that, but top positions at the FAA were left vacant by this administration, including the head of the agency who resigned under pressure from Elon Musk more than a week ago. So let's be very clear. This is not about diversity initiatives. This is about infrastructure, training, funding, and maintaining the highest safety standards that the American people deserve. When tragedy strikes, what real leaders do is use these times as moments to unite us. What real leaders do is provide comfort. They investigate, they solve, they don't divide, and they do not scapegoat. And they certainly don't exploit human suffering to advance a political agenda. The targeting of DEI initiatives and the communities that they support, it is not just wrong, it is dangerous. And it distracts us from the real work that's needed to happen to maintain and improve our nation's critical infrastructure.
Thank you, Kelley. And so now we are going to take your questions. If you have one, please raise your Zoom hand and then state your name and your organization before you ask your question. Oh, our Q&A function is working. Thank you so much, Jessica. Also, we have a Q&A function. First question is a follow-up on the BLS aviation diversity stats. Okay, we can get those to you, Claire. Next. Oh, the hand
Claire,
is raised.
you can unmute and say your name, affiliation, and your question, please.
Yes. And Claire here.
Hi, sorry, I was having trouble unmuting. I'm here. I'm Claire Savage. I cover women in the workforce for the Associated Press. Thank you all for sharing your thoughts and reactions today and your input. I'm wondering, it seems like President Trump in his comments today mostly focused on the disabilities in his critique of past FAA policy for diversity hiring. Did any of you have any sort of insight as to what the FAA has specifically done around this and or like the effects on the disabled community following these comments?
Well, it looks like Damon has something to say, but I just
Yeah,
wanted
yeah.
to I just wanted to name that one of the things, Claire, that I found really disturbing about his press conference is that he himself named that they both had no information or evidence to make them think that anything about the inclusivity of their workforce had anything to do with this horrific tragedy. Yet he felt confident pointing the finger um, there because that is going to be the answer and, frankly, the boogeyman for any problem that they have. And a responsible leader in the face of a tragedy would have done, as I said, two things. They would have comforted this country, and then they would have assured us this would never happen again. And step one of doing that would be a rich and meaningful investigation into what happened, rather than leaning on your ongoing trope that you've been using for everything. So it doesn't, frankly, give me a lot of confidence in the path ahead. It doesn't give me confidence that they will move away from this effort to engage in hate and division. It only is a reminder that we urgently need other serious leaders to stand in the way of the chaos in this moment.
I would concur with Fatima's comments. Damon Hewiit from the Lawyers Committee here. I do think that disability rights advocates, deserve to have their own voice and response in terms of how that particular community is impacted. What we're doing is both standing in solidarity with those who have been falsely accused as a blanket, but also seeing right through the thin veil that it is the otherization that Trump is so wont to do, whether it be differently able people today, whether it be Muslims or Arabs tomorrow, whether it be Black corporate executives, whether it be Latino or African immigrants. He is all about the blame. He's all about trying to remake America in his own grotesque image, and people shouldn't fall for it.
Thank you, Damon. We'll take a question now from Debbie Berry from the USA Today. Debbie, I don't know if you want to come live, but I'll start to read it while you join us in. It says, several of you said you're disturbed but not surprised by the remarks. What do you think might be the impact, if any, of his remarks? And the remarks seem to focus on the disability community. Did that surprise you? Do you think many people recognize that the DEI rollbacks include that community?
Hi, Kara. I'd love to take that question. Thanks so much. Unfortunately, none of us are surprised by that comment because Donald Trump has a long history of making fun of people in the disability community. of embarrassing himself and others by terrible slurs and rhetoric against the community. And so to see him point out or focus on a community, again, where there's no evidence, and he could not identify any evidence in support of his comments, is not a surprise at all. We do believe that people in this country, and there are millions of people in this country who do have different abilities, people will recognize what this attack means for them, for their access to services and programs, which he tried to freeze this week. They understand what it means to have civil rights protections rolled back and denied to people with disabilities, just as Black and Brown communities recognize it, just as women recognize what his threats mean. And we are absolutely determined not to allow this administration to get away with any of those actions. We are going to be looking at litigation, at advocacy, and at mass mobilization to make sure that this administration gets the message. We're not going to stand for this.
Yeah, and if I can just add to that, you know, I am surprised, and maybe I shouldn't be, but I am. But the callousness and lack of ability to comfort a nation through crisis, a crisis that happened in the backyard of the White House, surprises me. Seeing him then double down on DEI attacks rather than moving towards solutions, I think made clear the character of leadership that we are really navigating in this moment. And he wants to have it both ways. He wants us to believe that somehow, if you are Black, LGBTQ, a woman, a veteran, a person with a disability, that you don't have merit. And somehow that an error that occurred in an industry that lacks diversity, that is overwhelmingly white and overwhelmingly male, is somehow the fault of those same people. It doesn't work. The math and the facts simply do not add up. And at the end of the day, the charge in this moment is not to speculate and ask questions. It's really to solve the crisis and to comfort the country. And if we are going to ask questions, let's ask the real ones. Let's ask questions about what did the chaos that was created last week do to distract federal workers from doing the jobs that they were assigned to across the country? Let's ask the real questions about what sort of fear people are walking into work with because of his blatant threats towards federal workers, that they're not able to focus fully on their jobs. Let's ask those types of questions, because I think that's what we're actually seeing expose us to risk and uncertainty in this country that just should not be. This is what happens when you govern through chaos. It is dangerous, and not dangerous to some of us, dangerous to all of us.
Thank you, Kelley. I believe Emily McMorris has the next question from American Urban Radio Network.
Hi, how are you? Let me just say first, thank you for doing this. I was in the White House briefing when President Trump was speaking to the media. It was disturbing. What was equally disturbing also was some of the media who was cackling, laughing at some of the questions. I don't know if people at home could hear that, but it was quite disturbing. But my question was, can you talk about some of the actionable steps? You had actually mentioned litigation. I was wondering about that, but other actionable steps that organizations are talking about, or that we may be able to see. My second question also is, I've been thinking this whole time about the onslaught that we're about to see of unemployment of Black and Brown people. Watching Instagram all the time, people are breaking down with whether their contracts are being ended, seminars canceled left and right, jobs are being taken. But these conversations, are there any conversations on how we can start combating or helping or directing those who are about to be affected?
Thanks for that question. I want to note that diversity, equity, and inclusion programs are absolutely legal. They are protected under the Constitution and under civil laws. We are exploring now how the attacks on these programs are going to end up violating civil law protections already in existence in this country. And if the administration continues to pursue any kinds of efforts to roll back civil rights protections or anti-discrimination laws, there will be lawsuits filed. Many organizations, not just ours on this call, are involved in this effort, and that is something that you can count on moving forward. I'm sure my colleagues who also do litigation will also chime in on that.
Yes, Ebony, thank you for the question. At the Lawyers Committee, we really, since the Supreme Court's horrific decision in the Harvard and UNC Chapel Hill college admissions cases, and how that decision's been weaponized by so many, we've been advising dozens of smaller nonprofits, scholarship programs, and public charities who have missions to promote inclusion and opportunity for those who have so often been left behind, mostly Black and brown young people and women, students, small business owners, entrepreneurs, what have you. And so many of these people are directly impacted as grantees of federal programs or as contractors. And so we are working alongside colleagues to identify viable claims they have, because their rights, we believe, are being violated. They're being attacked because of their viewpoints. They're being attacked because they're simply trying to follow the law and promote opportunity. And we can't allow the law to be flipped on its head against them. As Margaret Huang from SPLC said, diversity, equity, and inclusion are simply a means to comply with existing legal obligations. Just because a president doesn't like those legal obligations, he can't change them just because he doesn't like it with the stroke of a pen. And so we believe there will be viable claims that follow on some of the other lawsuits. And people talk a lot about the presidential immunity decision from the Supreme Court and what have you. But let's remember, this man loses in court like a bad habit, right? And so some may ask, why are we speaking out together now? Why are we doing it? Why are we litigating? Because we can't allow this to be normalized. We simply can't allow this to be normalized. And so we'll speak out through the courts of public opinion, we'll speak out through the courts of law, and we'll speak out in other ways that make sense until people finally wake up and understand that we have to stand together, not against a person, but stand together for each other. That's what this country is supposed to be about.
Absolutely. And, well, you have leaders like us that are leading in the courts. We're also counting on people across this country to lead in every way that you can. Everything that you do matters in this. And let's remember, just last week, he tried to put forward that federal funding freeze that impacted school lunches and Meals on Wheels and Head Start programs. And because people spoke out and made their voices heard, we were able to put a stop to it. So in this moment, we want folks to understand that no executive order can override your constitutional protections or federal statutes. It's still illegal to discriminate against LGBTQ plus people in the workplace. And if you feel like you're in a situation where you want to speak up or where your rights are being violated, reach out to us as organizations. We have an email address, workers@hrc.org, that can also be a resource to folks who are leaving their roles, that want to speak out, or that just need support.
I would just add, since we are providing places where you can find information, that the National Women's Law Center also has a place to go at nwlc.org/legal help. That's where you can reach our legal network for gender equity and the broader work that we do to challenge sex discrimination at work, in housing, healthcare, and in education. And I also want to say, I understand how schools and workplaces and other institutions feel like they're being put in a tough position because they're being met with executive orders that have words like illegal in them, that are probably confusing. The law hasn't changed. And going down a rabbit hole where you make it more okay to discriminate, or actually emboldening discrimination or discriminating on your own, will open you up to additional complaints from your workers, from your students, from your tenants, and we'll be ready to be an outside private attorney general to ensure that that does not stand.
I'd like to add, I have been in touch, and I just got the permission to mention the NDRN, National Disability Rights Network, and their amazing leader, Marlene Sayo. I'm not sure if they're holding a press conference, but they will have a statement from allied disability rights groups. I didn't want to mention that without permission, but I have their permission to mention it. That should be available at 5 p.m. and you can contact that organization directly, or we'd be happy to help facilitate a connection.
Absolutely. You have indulged us for 4 extra minutes. And so we thank you so much for joining this call today. As all of the leaders who spoke out provided resources, you're happy to follow up on any of them if you missed them at press@nwlc.org, press@nwlc.org. And we will get you the links or the names or the things that may have been referenced that you may have missed. Thank you so much. Be safe. Take care of yourselves, and we will see you soon.